Hi, I know I'm just a cat, but I believe in kindness. If you click subscribe under this video, you'll make my day.
For my sister's birthday, they flew her to Paris. First-class seats, Eiffel Tower photos, a hotel suite with a private balcony, and dinner reservations that had to be made 3 months in advance. For mine, they gave me a leftover cupcake. I didn't say anything at the time, just smiled, thanked them politely, and scraped the waxy frosting off with a spoon in silence. But something about that day stuck to me like a piece of lint you keep brushing off, only to find it still clinging there hours later. I didn't think much of it until later that night, when I posted a photo. Just one picture, no caption, just me and the sad little cupcake, candle already burned halfway through. And that's when it started. The comments underneath that photo changed everything. It's hard to explain favoritism in families to people who haven't lived inside it. To outsiders, it sounds like pettiness, jealousy, or middle child syndrome. But when you're the one living it, when you're the one watching it slowly unravel every corner of your life, it becomes impossible to ignore. I've spent 39 years swallowing that quiet imbalance like cough syrup. Unpleasant, bitter, but necessary to keep peace. My name is Natalie. And if you were to ask anyone who knows me, my friends, coworkers, even my husband, they'd probably say I'm the level-headed one, the calm one, the person who always knows how to handle things. But inside my own family, I've always been something else entirely, the background character in someone else's spotlight. My sister Hannah is 10 years younger than me. She was born when I was already in junior high, and our parents never really hid the fact that she was their miracle baby. That's what they called her. Miracle. I used to think it meant she was just born later in life, after mom had some complications, or maybe they weren't trying and suddenly it happened. But as I got older, I started to understand that miracle meant something else entirely. It meant she was everything I wasn't. Hannah was loud, dramatic, impulsive, and magnetic, in a way I never could be. People flocked to her. Teachers excused her late homework. My parents made excuses for every mistake she made. Bad grades, boy trouble, even wrecking a brand new car when she was 17. I, on the other hand, got a strict curfew, grounded for a B+, and expected to babysit her on Saturday nights while my friends went to the movies. I was never angry about it, at least not in the way people expect. Anger takes too much energy. What I felt was closer to a low-grade ache that never really went away. I learned early on that fighting it only made me seem jealous, so I gave up the fight and leaned into being the good one. I went to college, got married, had 2 boys, worked full-time, and still hosted Thanksgiving every year, even though my mom always asked Hannah to carve the turkey, because it made for better pictures. This year, when Hannah turned 29, they pulled out all the stops. They announced the Paris trip 6 months in advance. She got a custom itinerary with everything she'd ever wanted to do. She even brought a friend. My parents paid for both of them. I scrolled through her Instagram stories of champagne in a crystal flute, her posing with some moody Parisian backdrop, while I sat on my couch with laundry piled next to me and one of my kids vomiting from a stomach bug. I wasn't invited, of course. I didn't even get a postcard. Then came my birthday, just a month later, 39. Not a milestone, sure, but still something. I came over to my parents' house expecting maybe dinner, or at the very least, a small gathering. What I got was a cold hug, a microwaved casserole that tasted like freezer burn, and a store-bought cupcake with a candle someone had clearly already lit once before, because the wick was blackened and half melted. No card, no gift, not even a "how are you feeling this year" from my mom. My dad gave me a distracted nod from the couch. Hannah didn't even call. She texted a balloon emoji. Just one. No words. I didn't react, didn't cry, didn't lash out or raise my voice. I just went home that night, still in the same blouse I wore to work, kicked off my shoes in the kitchen, and sat on the edge of my tub staring at that damn cupcake. I ended up lighting the candle again, because I thought, maybe this time, I'll make a wish that actually works. I took a photo, no smiling, no filters. Just me, holding the cupcake with the candle flickering. I posted it on Facebook, no caption. It felt like something I had to do, though I didn't know why at the time. It was quiet, unremarkable, just a little flicker in the timeline. And then the comments started rolling in. At first, it was the usual stuff. Happy birthday, and you look great. But then there was one that made my stomach twist. It was from someone named Laura Henson. I didn't recognize the name, but the comment stood out like it was written in bold red letters. It said, "You're finally seeing it, huh?" That was it. No emojis, no explanation, just that one line. My heart started racing, and I clicked on her profile. Her photo was familiar in a way I couldn't place, like a face from a dream you barely remember when you wake up. Something in me said I knew her, or used to know her, or should know her. I scrolled through her page, hoping to jog a memory, and saw she lived 2 towns over. Her photos were mostly of dogs, church potlucks, and grandkids. Nothing obviously strange, but something about her face and the timing of her comment made me feel like I'd just stumbled onto the edge of a cliff I didn't know I was walking toward. I sent her a message. Just a short one. "Hi Laura, I saw your comment. What did you mean?" And I sat there staring at the screen, not expecting a reply. But within 5 minutes, she messaged me back. Her message said, "Ask your dad about the favor. He won't lie if you use those words." And that was the moment I stopped pretending I was okay with being the forgotten daughter. I didn't sleep much the night Laura Henson messaged me back. And not because I was scared exactly, though fear did come later in its own quiet, creeping way, but because my brain wouldn't stop replaying her words over and over until they started to sound like they were stitched into some kind of pattern I didn't quite understand yet. Ask your dad about the favor. He won't lie if you use those words. It's strange how certain phrases, when delivered without context, can carry more weight than full explanations, and how a few typed words from a near stranger can suddenly shove your whole life off its axis. I stared at my phone long enough for the screen to go black, then lit it back up just to reread her message, like maybe I'd missed something the first dozen times. The phrase "the favor" didn't mean anything to me, at least not consciously, but there was something in my gut, some subtle clench of instinct, that told me this wasn't a misunderstanding or the ramblings of a confused old woman. This was deliberate. It was quiet, but sharp, like a pin hidden under a blanket. And when I clicked on Laura's profile again, searching for some clue to our connection, I finally landed on a church photo. Just a regular group shot, probably from one of those bake sale fundraisers or senior luncheons. But in the back row, barely visible, stood a woman I hadn't seen in years. My mother. She wasn't front and center like she normally preferred to be in photos, but her posture was unmistakable. Stiff shoulders, one foot slightly behind the other, chin raised just enough to show off the string of pearls she wore to every important event. No matter how informal. My heart dropped into my stomach. I stared at that photo like it was a crime scene, and my mother was the main suspect. Suddenly, Laura Henson wasn't a stranger anymore. She was someone who'd known my family, someone who had, at one point or another, stood close enough to my mother to be included in a group photo. I spent the rest of that night doing what any reasonable person would do when they feel like something sacred has been tampered with. I began digging, aimlessly at first, scrolling through Laura's old posts, family events, comments she'd made on mutual friends' pages. I recognized other names too, people from my childhood church, women who used to pinch my cheeks and ask about school, men who always smelled faintly of coffee and aftershave, the same people who had slowly disappeared from our lives when Hannah was born. When the sun came up, I was still awake, jittery with caffeine and a mounting sense of dread that felt too big to hold by myself. So I woke Mark, my husband, and told him everything. I read him Laura's message and showed him the photo. He listened, patient as always, rubbing the sleep from his eyes as he processed what I was saying. And when I finished, all he said was, "Maybe it's finally time to ask." I waited until late afternoon, after I knew my dad would be home from work, but before my mom's book club would start filling the house with the sound of wine glasses and competitive laughter. I didn't text him or give a heads up, I just called. The phone rang twice before he answered, his voice neutral but distant. The way it always was with me. Like I was a solicitor he wasn't quite sure he wanted to hang up on. "Hey, Dad," I said, trying to keep my tone light, casual, as if I were calling to chat about the weather or ask for a casserole recipe. "I've got kind of a weird question. Someone reached out to me online and told me to ask you about the favor. Does that mean anything to you?" The pause on the other end of the line was so long I thought the call had dropped. I pulled the phone away to check the screen, but the seconds were still ticking, the line still connected. When he finally spoke, his voice sounded like it had dropped several degrees. "Where did you hear that?" he asked. And suddenly I wasn't talking to my dad anymore. I was talking to someone else entirely. A man with secrets. A man with guilt. "I told you," I said. "A woman named Laura Henson said you'd tell me the truth if I used those words." Another silence, then a sharp inhale, like he was about to explain everything. But instead of answers, I got a click. Then the dial tone. He'd hung up. At that moment, I wasn't sure what rattled me more. The fact that he didn't deny knowing what I was talking about, or the fact that he responded with fear instead of confusion. Because if I'd asked him something truly absurd, something ridiculous or completely fabricated, he would have scoffed, maybe even laughed it off or called it nonsense, but he didn't. He went silent. He panicked. 2 days passed. No call back. No text. Not a word from my dad, and when I tried to casually bring it up to my mom, mentioning that I'd spoken to someone from the old church and she'd brought up a favor from years ago, she waved it off, smiling with that rehearsed, dismissive tone she used whenever the topic veered into uncomfortable territory. "Oh, people remember the strangest things," she said. "You know how women gossip." But she wouldn't meet my eyes. The next morning, an envelope showed up in my mailbox. No return address, my name written in careful, almost old-fashioned handwriting. I opened it right there on the porch, feeling a strange chill settle over me before I'd even looked inside. And when I did, my breath caught in my throat. It was a photo, an actual printed photo, slightly bent at the corners, probably decades old. In it, I was maybe 2 years old, still chubby-cheeked and wide-eyed, wearing a little red dress I didn't recognize. I was sitting on the lap of a woman I had never seen before, her face unfamiliar, her smile soft but sad. The way she held me, one arm around my waist, one hand resting on my back, didn't feel casual, it felt maternal. And the thing that undid me completely, the thing that made the world tilt in a way it had never done before, was the note on the back of the photo, written in the same precise handwriting as the envelope, just 5 words. "You were almost hers. D." That's when I realized I had no idea who I was to them. And maybe I never really had. The photo haunted me in a way that felt almost chemical, like it had seeped into my bloodstream the moment I saw it, disrupting something inside of me that I had never even known was fragile until that very second. And from the instant I held it between my fingers, lightweight yet unbearably heavy with implication, I knew that the woman in the picture, this unknown presence from a forgotten chapter of my early life, wasn't simply some distant family friend or neighbor caught in a candid moment, but someone integral to a truth I had never been told. There was something about her posture, the familiarity of the way her arms wrapped around my small body, and especially the way she was looking at me, not just with affection, but with a longing that made my chest ache. That told me in no uncertain terms that this wasn't just a memory I had forgotten, but one that had been taken from me deliberately. I kept the photo tucked into the inside flap of my wallet for the next few days, pulling it out quietly at odd times, like while waiting in line at the pharmacy, or when sitting alone in the car after work, hoping that repetition would somehow unlock recognition, that if I stared long enough, the truth would crystallize, sharp and undeniable, out of the murky haze of childhood. But each time I looked at it, all I saw was the same face I didn't know, and the same gnawing feeling that this woman had been important and then erased. When I finally decided to act, It wasn't with any kind of grand plan or cinematic determination, but more like a slow accumulating sense of inevitability, like reaching the end of a staircase you didn't realize you were climbing until your foot hit the top step. I turned to the only tool I had, the internet. I scanned the image and ran it through reverse searches, narrowed locations, filtered by era, and cross-referenced names from old church rosters, finally remembering that Laura Henson had referred to a favor that involved my father, which now, in light of this photo, felt increasingly like something to do with custody, or perhaps even something deeper, something heavier than I'd let myself believe. Hours blurred into a late-night haze until finally, a hit came back from an archived newspaper in Oregon, a charity newsletter with a group photo of foster volunteers from the late 1980s. There she was, the woman in my photo. Her name was Donna McAllister. It felt surreal, like reaching through glass and touching something that had only ever existed in the corners of my subconscious. And once I had her name, everything else began to fall into place with the kind of terrifying ease that makes you wonder how close the truth has always been to the surface, waiting for just one breath too strong to reveal it. Donna had been a foster parent in Oregon for over 20 years. No criminal record, a spotless file from what I could see. And from the timeline I managed to piece together, she would have been fostering children right around the time I was born. I found a phone number tied to a recent community bake sale post and called it before I had time to talk myself out of it. The phone rang 4 times before a woman answered, her voice warm but cautious. The kind of tone you use when you're not sure if the person on the other end is trying to sell you something or bring you bad news. I introduced myself as carefully as I could, stumbling through the connection between her and the photo, and when I finally asked her, straight out, if she knew who I was, there was a pause so long I thought she might hang up, or worse, lie. But instead she exhaled slowly and said, "I've been waiting for this call for over 30 years. Those words changed everything. Over the course of an hour-long conversation, punctuated by nervous laughter and more than a few tears, I tried to keep silent. Donna revealed to me a version of my early life that no one in my family had ever acknowledged, let alone spoken aloud. She told me that when I was born, there had been a plan in place, a quiet, private arrangement to have me adopted through her foster system, a process initiated not because of poverty or danger, but because of pressure. She didn't know all the details, only that my maternal grandparents, particularly my mother's father, had been adamant that my mother not keep the baby. She'd had too young, too soon, and with the wrong man. According to Donna, my mother had gone along with the plan at first, likely out of fear or submission, until, seemingly at the last minute, my father had called in a favor from someone he knew with influence, someone involved in social work or the county court system. The details were vague, but whatever strings he pulled, it worked. The adoption never went through. Donna said she was given the call one afternoon that I wouldn't be placed in her care after all, and that I was going home with my parents instead. The call was polite, professional, but she remembered crying after she hung up. "I'd already had you for a week," she told me softly, "and I knew better than to get attached. But you were just a baby, but you were alert in a way that I still remember. You had this way of studying faces, like you were already trying to understand the world before you could even speak." It was too much to process at once. I thanked her, promised I'd follow up, and hung up with my head spinning. I sat in my living room for what felt like hours, the silence pressing in on me, the knowledge that I had been almost given away, that I had nearly lived an entirely different life, colliding with the memory of that burnt-wick cupcake and the empty smiles my family had tossed at me like scraps. And the thing that stung most was the realization that this wasn't some accident or unspoken trauma they'd chosen to bury for my protection. It was a deliberate lie by omission, a decision to keep me in the dark while rewarding my sister with the kind of affection and attention I had spent my entire life chasing, like a dog chasing headlights. Because now it made sense. Hannah wasn't just the baby they had later in life. She was the make-good, the apology to themselves, the second chance to do things right. I wasn't the miracle, I was the consequence. And somewhere between rage and grief, between betrayal and a hollow kind of clarity, something inside me shifted permanently. I wasn't sure what I was going to do yet. Not fully, but I knew I wasn't going to let this slide back into silence. Not this time. And the first step, the very first crack in the perfect little mask they had always expected me to wear, was going to be delivered with a smile. So I picked up my phone, pulled up my sister's contact, and typed out a message so cheerful it practically bounced off the screen. "Hey, I've got something really special planned for your birthday this year. Just you wait." There's a very particular kind of satisfaction in pretending everything is fine, while quietly dismantling the world of someone who's spent years pretending you don't exist. Not in the literal sense, of course, but in that slow, corrosive, reality-bending way, where your worth is acknowledged only when it serves someone else's narrative. So when I sent that cheerful little message to Hannah, promising her something special for her upcoming birthday, I wasn't entirely sure how I would follow through at that moment. But what I did know, deep in the marrow of my bones, in that quiet space where clarity lives after too many years of being pushed aside, was that I wasn't going to play along anymore. I wasn't going to smile politely through another party where she wore the tiara and I held the camera, or let another round of applause go to her while I cleaned dishes in the background. This time, I wasn't going to be the one bringing balloons. I was going to be the storm that popped them. To everyone else, it looked like I was finally coming around, maybe even making peace with the years of imbalance between us. Because I told my mother I wanted to take over Hannah's birthday planning this year, insisting she relax and let me handle all the details for once. My mother, never one to question an opportunity to avoid responsibility while still collecting credit, responded with one of those overly sweet, self-congratulatory laughs that always made me want to clench my jaw, patting my hand as if I were finally learning my place. "See," she said, "I knew you girls would find your rhythm eventually." And just like that, she handed me the reins, utterly unaware that I was planning to steer the horse off a very specific cliff. The thing about Hannah is, she thrives on spectacle, not because she needs the attention in the shallow sense, but because being the center of everything has always reinforced her identity in our family. She isn't just the favorite, she's the brand. She's the drama, the charm, the sparkle in the room that everyone is expected to orbit. And she knows it. She knows how to cry at the exact right moment during a toast, how to feign modesty when unwrapping an expensive gift, how to say, "I can't believe you did all this for me," while making sure the lighting is good enough for a photo. Planning her party was easy because I knew exactly what she would expect. Something glossy, Instagram-worthy, expensive enough to be impressive but not vulgar, personal enough to feel like love, but vague enough that the gesture could be interpreted however she pleased. And I gave her all of that. I booked a private room at her favorite rooftop bar downtown, made sure the floral arrangements matched the blush pink tones she always claimed were her color, hired a live acoustic guitarist who specialized in mellow covers of popular love songs, and ordered a custom cake that featured delicate edible gold flakes and piped buttercream roses. I sent out polished invitations, made sure the lighting was soft and flattering, and even created a little photo booth area with props and a gold sequin backdrop because I knew she'd want at least a dozen curated moments for her social media feed. I gave her the party she would have planned for herself, but I added one thing she never would have considered: the truth. You see, while everyone was sipping overpriced cocktails and complimenting Hannah on how radiant she looked, and while my parents beamed proudly as if they were watching their golden child ascend some invisible throne, I was waiting, quietly, for the right moment to step forward. I wasn't nervous, I wasn't trembling or pacing or second-guessing anything. I was calm in a way that surprised me, the way you feel when you've rehearsed something so thoroughly in your mind that performing it becomes instinct. When the cake was brought out and the lights dimmed and everyone gathered around to sing that tired ceremonial chorus, I smiled just as widely as the rest, standing right beside her, clapping gently, waiting for her to bask in the glow of candles and camera flashes. Then, as everyone reached for champagne flutes and began preparing for the toast, I took the microphone. I could feel the weight of a dozen confused stares turning toward me. After all, I wasn't usually the one to speak at these things, but I held their gaze with the kind of poise I had never allowed myself before. I started with something light, something charming, telling the room how beautiful Hannah looked and how much effort she put into being the vibrant, shining heart of the family. People smiled, nodded, relaxed. But then I pivoted, gently at first, describing a memory of us as children, one of many moments where I watched her being lifted, applauded, celebrated, while I was quietly expected to make myself smaller so she could have more space. I didn't say it bitterly. I said it honestly, plainly, with a softness that made people lean in rather than pull away. Then I thanked everyone, my parents especially, for showing me over the years exactly how love could be measured out, carefully, strategically, like a resource that had to be conserved for those who'd earned it. And finally, I told them I had a little surprise. With a click of the remote, the projection screen behind the bar came to life, not with a slideshow of Hannah's greatest hits, but with photos of my own birthdays throughout the years, pictures no one else had seen because no one had ever taken them seriously. There was the year I turned 15 and celebrated alone with a grocery store cupcake. The year I graduated college and had dinner by myself because no one could make it. The baby shower that was overshadowed by Hannah's engagement announcement. Picture after picture, me alone, holding balloons in empty rooms, smiling through silence. Some people chuckled uncomfortably, others shifted in their seats. My mother reached for her wine glass and avoided my eyes. And then, just one slide, white text on a black screen. Happy birthday to the one who taught me how invisible love can be. I let the silence settle for a few beats before setting down the microphone. I didn't cry, I didn't scream, I just smiled politely, walked past the frozen expressions on my parents' faces, past Hannah, whose mouth was still open mid-laugh, and out into the hallway. I could hear the murmurs begin behind me, first low and cautious, then louder, urgent, defensive. I kept walking. By the time I got home, my phone had lit up with 10 missed calls, 4 voicemails, and a cascade of texts, most of them from Hannah and my mother. The tone shifted from confused to furious to desperate within the hour. My father didn't message at all. And then, right as I was setting my phone down to pour a glass of wine, I saw a new message request pop up on Facebook. "You're not the only one. Call me." The name below it stopped me cold. Meredith Vaughn. A name I didn't recognize. But the last name? That was as my father's. For a long time after reading that message, from someone named Meredith Vaughn, a woman whose name meant absolutely nothing to me on the surface, but carried the unmistakable weight of something I hadn't been prepared to feel. I just sat there on the couch, the glow of my phone screen flickering against the wine glass in my hand, heart slow but heavy, as if my body already knew something my mind hadn't yet figured out. There's a particular ache that comes from thinking the worst is behind you, from feeling like you've already peeled back the most painful layers and made your peace with what's underneath, only to realize you've barely scratched the surface, and something deeper, colder, more permanent is waiting just beneath. I stared at her name for so long that it almost lost meaning, the letters rearranging themselves in my head, until all that remained was that last name, Vaughn, which had belonged to me for 39 years, and yet had never felt more foreign than it did in that moment. Something inside me shifted, not like a lightning strike or a sudden realization, but like a door quietly creaking open down a long hallway I didn't know existed. I clicked on her profile. Her photo was simple, just her and a dog, and nothing about her screamed scandal or revelation. She looked kind, ordinary, but her eyes, those pale gray eyes, caught me off guard because I'd seen them before. I'd seen them in the mirror every day of my life. Her message was short, but it said everything it needed to. "You're not the only one. Call me." I hesitated for a full day, not out of fear necessarily, but because I wasn't sure I could take on one more truth, one more unraveling. I'd already lit the match that burned down the careful house my family had built around my silence, and while part of me felt free for the first time in my life, another part, quieter but persistent, was afraid that freedom didn't come without consequence. But eventually, curiosity, or maybe inevitability, won out. I dialed the number she'd provided in a follow-up message and waited, holding the phone so tightly I could feel the sweat gather at the base of my neck. When she answered, her voice was soft but certain, the kind of voice that has been waiting to speak its truth for a very long time. "Hi, Natalie," she said, without needing me to introduce myself, as if we'd known each other for years or maybe lifetimes, but had just missed each other every time. We talked for over 2 hours that night, unraveling decades in a slow, delicate rhythm, peeling back the layers of a secret that neither of us had asked for, but both of us had paid for in different ways. Meredith told me she was my half-sister, the result of an affair my father had before I was born. An affair with a woman he had promised to leave behind but never truly let go of. Her mother had been young and alone, unwilling to fight a man with resources and a clean image, so she raised Meredith quietly, without demands or expectation. For years, Meredith had been told she was the product of a mistake, that it was better to stay quiet and not stir things up, and so she did. Until she started to wonder if maybe, just maybe, she wasn't the only child who had grown up with her father's shadow instead of his presence. She found me through a mutual contact on social media, someone who had posted about Hannah's Paris birthday and tagged a photo of the cake with my name. A small mention, easily overlooked by anyone else. But not Meredith. She followed the trail, saw the cupcake photo, the speech video from the party someone had uploaded without my consent, and then the cascade of comments below it. Some supportive, some vicious, most confused. And something inside her clicked. "That look on your face in that photo," she said quietly, was the same one I used to see in the mirror growing up. By the end of the call, I felt like the floor had shifted permanently under my feet, not just because I had another sister, though the irony of that wasn't lost on me, but because, for the first time in my life, I realized that my family wasn't just complicated or emotionally neglectful. They were built on half-truths, careful omissions, and the kind of image management that would make a PR firm blush. My father, the man who never quite looked at me fully, who never praised me in the same glowing terms he used for Hannah, who sat stone-faced at my high school graduation while cheering like a child at hers. He wasn't just distant. He had been protecting something, or perhaps hiding from it, and I had been the living reminder. Later that week, I made the drive to see him. He was in the garden, trimming hedges with the slow, deliberate movements of someone who believed appearances mattered even when no one was watching. He didn't look surprised to see me. He simply straightened his back, wiped his hands on a towel, and nodded once, like this was a business meeting he'd anticipated for years. I didn't yell. I didn't accuse. I didn't even ask the questions I'd rehearsed in the car. I just looked at him and said, "Did you ever love me?" And for the first time, he didn't deflect. He met my eyes with a gaze that was both weary and resigned, and said, "You were the mistake I couldn't undo." There was no apology, no sorrow, just the cold, sterile truth of a man who had long ago made his peace with the damage he caused. I left without another word, not because I was angry, though anger would have been easier, but because there was nothing left to gather from that wreckage. The house I'd grown up in wasn't a home, it was a stage, and the role I'd been forced to play had finally reached its final scene. Over the next few months, I spoke to Meredith regularly. I even flew out to Oregon to meet her in person. We talked, laughed, cried, compared stories and scars. There was something healing in that strange, awkward kinship, like finding an echo of yourself in a place you never expected to be seen. I also reconnected with Donna, the woman who had almost raised me, and with her help, I began the long process of reclaiming my story. Not the one my parents wrote for me, but the one I had buried under their expectations. When my 40th birthday came around, I threw myself a party, not for validation or spectacle, but for closure. There was cake, real cake, made by a bakery that spelled my name correctly. There were candles that hadn't been used before. There were friends, laughter, music, and a sense of peace that felt earned rather than borrowed. I didn't invite my parents. I didn't invite Hannah. I didn't need to. Before the night ended, I took a photo, just me holding a slice of cake, no filters, no caption, and posted it online. Almost immediately, the likes and comments rolled in, some from people who'd seen the birthday speech video and now viewed me as a kind of quiet hero. Some from people who just thought the cake looked good. But one comment, buried beneath the noise, stood out in a way that made the hairs on my arms stand up. "You still don't know everything. Call me." The username? Truth catches up. And just like that, the story I thought had ended quietly whispered that it wasn't over yet.